Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending upon where you are in the world. This is Walter Davis with Progress in the World radio show coming to you from beautiful Canyon Lake, California. And today I have the great pleasure to have a candidate for Lieutenant Governor of California, Gayle McLaughlin. And so Gayle was born in Chicago, Illinois, into a working-class union family. She is the middle child of 5 daughters. Her father was a carpenter and member of the Carpenters Union, and her mother was a factory worker and housewife. As a young activist during the 1980s, Gayle worked with the Central American Solidarity Movement, People United to Save Humanity, PUSH, and the Rainbow Coalition. Gayle is married to Paul Kilkenny, also a Richmond activist for social and environmental justice. So Gayle has been able to accomplish some amazing things with her alliance in Northern California. And today we're going to be talking to her about those accomplishments and why she should be Lieutenant Governor. Welcome to the show, Gayle.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you for having me on.
Outstanding. Now, you're not part of a political party. Talk about that just real briefly.
Yes, I'm registered NPP, which is no party preference. That's a way you could register in California. I used to be a Green Party member, and I decided to switch to NPP so I could vote for Bernie Sanders in the California primary, because in California you can vote for a Democratic candidate for the primary if you're registered NPP. And then after the primary, I decided to stay NPP. And the reason for that is because I think it allows me the opportunity to deepen the relationships I already have with people of various parties. I mean, I have built wonderful relationships with progressive Democrats, with Green Party members, and with people who have no party affiliation. And I want to deepen those relationships. And you know, that's part of the role of my running for Lieutenant Governor. And I feel that my work in Richmond as the former 2-term mayor of Richmond really got us going in that direction, building that kind of coalition and of people with various parties.
Now, you've been able to accomplish some amazing things, and I just want to start off with some of them that I've heard you talk about already. You've been able to reduce the crime dramatically by taking a different approach to law enforcement.
That's right.
Can you talk about that?
Sure, yes. In Richmond, first of all, let me share that Richmond is a city, a very diverse city. It's a city of about 110,000 people. We have 40% Latinos, 27% African Americans, 16% Asian Americans, and the rest are the white population, and there's some Native Americans and Pacific Islanders as well. And that diversity really makes up our strength in Richmond. So we work together as progressives in Richmond, and that's how we were able to get things done. And later I could share a little bit about how our organization came together. But on the crime question in particular, we were able to reduce homicides 75% over 8 years. And the way we did that was by addressing the root causes of violence. Rather than just saying more police have to be out in the streets stamping out crime. Well, yes, we want a strong response from police when a crime happens, but we want also crimes not to happen in the first place. And the way to do that is by providing opportunities. So we put in place an award-winning job training program, offered programs for our youth like anger management, substance abuse programs, and we put in place an office that we call the Office of Neighborhood Safety. And it's made up of individuals who are formerly incarcerated and who turned their lives around. And then the city hired them to go out into our neighborhoods as outreach teams and relate to the youth that have been in trouble, and to quell the violence before it begins. And they did this by referring the youth, and the trust is there by someone who has been through the experience of getting desperate and ending up, in various lifestyles that are unhealthy for themselves and others. So when somebody who has been formerly incarcerated is reaching out to our youth saying, don't do like I did. I had to serve time, and I did make the changes in my lifestyle, but you don't have to go through that. You can change your life now, and I'm here to help you and gear you into the needed programs. So that's how we did it. We really addressed these root causes of crime. We raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We give opportunities to people. And we also get a community involved. We still have a community involved police force that changed the culture of the police, of the city police to a great extent. There's always more work to be done. But we were able to reduce crime. Like when I first started as mayor, the annual homicide was 47. The number was 47. And by the end, the last year I was mayor, it went down to 11. So that was phenomenal. Still 11 too much. I always say that because we don't want any homicides. But that was phenomenal, and we are continuing to work at that kind of, that kind of root cause solution to problems.
That's just outstanding.
Thank you.
The best part of this whole thing is that you guys were able to defeat big corporate money. Chevron threw big money into campaigns to defeat your alliance. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure, yes. So, first of all, the Richmond Progressive Alliance is the organization you referred to, and we call it the RPA. And we came together in 2003 because we had had enough. We had seen our city, get more and more problems without any changes being affected in the right direction by our city council. And that's because the whole city council was in the hands of Chevron. Now, we have this major oil refinery, the Chevron oil refinery in Richmond. It's the most productive refinery in the state of California, also the largest greenhouse gas emitter in the state of California. And, they bought our elections year after year after year, election year after election year. And all the city council was either purchased by Chevron, or the council members that weren't purchased were intimidated by this oil giant. So we decided, it's time to become the leaders we're waiting for. And that's when I decided to run for city council. And the RPA is an inclusive, diverse, progressive, corporate-free, year-round organization that runs candidates for local office without any corporate money. So I ran for city council without taking a penny of corporate money. And I became the first corporate-free council member on the city council. And then I later ran for mayor, and again without any corporate money, and was elected mayor and then re-elected mayor, and then turned out as mayor and ran for city council again. All four of my campaigns were ran and won without any corporate money. And to your point, Walter, this is in a town where Chevron puts millions into the electoral season, into the electoral arena to try and defeat progressives. So in 2014, Chevron spent $3.5 million to try and defeat me and two other progressives. And at the November 2014 election, all the progressives, myself and two other progressives, all of us were endorsed by Bernie Sanders, by the way, but all of us beat that $3.5 million, and all the Chevron-sponsored candidates lost. So we showed that we can overcome the power of money in elections by building relationships with the community. That's the way we did it, and by having an organization like the RPA, an alliance, a coalition that stands not only for the good progressives that have principles and will run for office, but for the community at large. And that's what democracy is all about. So we were able to make the changes, and many changes, because of this organization, which now, I want to add, the RPA has, because of the RPA and our work, we now, as of November 2016, have 5 corporate-free council seats out of 7 in the Richmond City Council. So that's a super majority of the City Council, when a little over a decade ago, Chevron owned the City Council. So we have significantly transformed the city, and that's what I'm all about, building local political power and encouraging cities and communities everywhere to do like the RPA did and run local candidates without corporate money. And you can make the transformations that we made as well. And that's what my campaign for Lieutenant Governor is encouraging. It's really an organizing campaign, although I'm running to win as well. But, you know, even if we got wonderful progressives in every office in the country, on every level of government, if we didn't have that grassroots organizing and those coalitions and alliances that bring people together, our democracy would be incomplete. So I'm really encouraging that grassroots organizing, and this is the time for it when we have this really catastrophic free-fall situation with the White House right now, and people are ripe for organizing. So I'm glad to be a part of this effort.
Well, that's all just such a wonderful thing to see everyday citizens take management, take control of their local government. Just putting in small donations, right?
That's right, yeah.
Just everyday people put in little small donations, and you overcame millions of dollars that Chevron pumped in.
That's right, absolutely. It was, you know, by many individuals contributing money without any corporate money involved. We did not have as much money to put into the electoral arena as Chevron, of course, but we were able to get significant amounts of money because so many people understood what we were doing and wanted to share these small donations, and it all adds up. And of course, we make efficient use of the campaign money. We run in slates so that we can do a mailer with 3 candidates for city council, 3 progressives when there are 3 seats open. And that way, you save money because each campaign can pay for 1/3 of the mailer. So we make efficient use of the money, and we have some public financing in Richmond that we stood for, some matching funds. It's not a lot, but a candidate can get up to $25,000 in matching funds, and we always, tell people when they contribute, the city will throw in some money as well. So we make use of every opportunity to get as much, again, corporate-free money involved, but more than that, we build the relationships with the community, and that has made all the difference.
That's just tremendous. I mean, the story just makes me feel so good. I watch the videos on YouTube, and I'm just really proud of what you stand for and what you're all about. Now, there's a number of issues I'd like to touch on, like the environment. Your approach towards law enforcement. What's your policy on that? What's your policy on, say, fiscal budgeting and those kind of things? What are your top priorities? So maybe you can tell me that. What are your top priorities?
Sure. So a lot of what I'm standing for on the state level emerged from our work in Richmond, and it kind of gave me an example of what can happen on a local level, and when we know it can happen on a local level, certain issues extend into the statewide arena that you can do more, and you have to do more because certain issues cannot be addressed on a local level. You can do a lot on a local level, and you can keep doing more and more, but certain issues like single-payer health care for all have to be addressed on the state level, so I'm standing for that. I'm standing for free college. We want, every student should have an opportunity to get a good education from preschool on to higher education. I'm standing against fracking. You mentioned the environment. We want to, preserve the water supply in California. I mean, it's so clear that fracking has brought toxins into the groundwater and into the water supply, and it's causing earthquakes. So we want to really stop this horrible fossil fuel operation that is going on right now. And we want to make sure that we have the taxation of corporations. Now, this is an example of how we did it on a local level. In Richmond, we got $114 million in additional taxes from Chevron. And we did this by organizing the community, coming up to the public podium at city council meetings, calling for fair taxation so that our city could provide the resources and the programs that our community needed. And Chevron finally came to the table and negotiated. We actually passed a ballot measure in favor of taxing large manufacturers, which would have been predominantly Chevron. The citizens of Richmond passed it. Chevron brought us to court, and the courts overturned it in Chevron's favor. But we were getting ready to put another ballot measure on, correcting some of the, there was some technical difficulties that the court was saying. So when Chevron heard that we were going back into the ballot box with a new tax measure, they came to the negotiating table, and they agreed to give us $114 million in additional taxes over 15 years. So this is what you can do when you have community power and coalitions and alliances. So that can happen on a statewide level. We need to tax the 1%, and we can do things like reform Prop 13. Prop 13 is supposed to be for average homeowners, for working class people, or seniors. That's what Prop 13 came about for. And instead, big corporations have taken advantage of it. So reforming Prop 13 is a way to close the corporate loophole. Still keep it for our residences throughout California, but make sure that the corporate loophole is closed. It will bring in $9 billion of extra taxes statewide every year. And we could use that money to improve our schools, to put them, at the top again rather than at the bottom. Other tax measures are a millionaire's tax. I think we need a progressive millionaire's tax in California so that every $1 million of income that an entity takes in or an individual takes in, they should get into a higher tax bracket. They should pay additional taxes for each million. So that will bring in more tax money. Also, an oil severance tax. Now, this ties in with the environment as well. Right now, California is the only major oil-producing state in the country that does not have a tax on oil extraction. Now, we don't want to see most people who understand about climate change and the fact that we're using up all the oil don't want to see more extraction happen. And we should ban further extraction. But as long as operations are happening right now, Californians should deserve some tax money from that. And so what I'm saying is we need to tax extraction and each year put it in a higher tax bracket. So it'll discourage them from doing further extraction. So every year of extraction operations that are currently in place, let's make it a higher extraction tax. And of course, no new operations. And then also, once we get that money, that tax money, into California's coffers, we should use that money to really put renewable energy throughout the whole state, to really take us away from being dependent on fossil fuels, so that future generations have a planet to live on and thrive on. And I think we can do that by giving homeowners rebates for solar on their rooftops, so that every homeowner could have solar and the cheaper price that solar, the sun is for free. So instead of giving the electric company your money, you can get energy from the sun. And so to me, this is an example of what we can do with the kind of taxation that we could bring in if we had the willpower. And I think I've shown I've had that willpower from my work on a local level. What we did in Richmond is we became #1 in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, for solar installed per capita. And we also made use of the Obama stimulus money that came out initially in the Obama administration. And what we did was use some of that money to give rebates to our homeowners if they put solar on their rooftops and if they used our residents to put the solar installation in place, because we had an award-winning solar installation job training program. So we brought about renewable energy for our homeowners, and we gave jobs to our residents. I think we could do the same on a statewide level. It's just a question of having the willpower and having people in office that are going to stand for and champion these issues.
So it's amazing to me that I sat down and figured out the F-35 fighter, the money spent on that, could have built 60 solar-powered desalination plants and assuaged our water shortage here in Southern California. The Saudi Arabians use solar-powered desalination plants. And we have fantastic technologies like molten salt electric power generators that don't produce any pollution and can provide power for up to 50,000 people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we're putting money into the military budget that brings about destruction when we could be putting money into creative efforts that really help sustain our planet and give people opportunities and bring about the kind of prosperity that we need in our state, rather than putting it into these destructive weapons and that cause harm and destruction to people from our country who are in the military, and of course destruction for others all around the world. So I'm totally into the fact that we need to take money from the military and give it to cities. As mayor of a city, I know how hard it is to make ends meet with your limited budget when you have federal cuts and state cuts. Cities have shrinking budgets these days, and it's because they're not getting the same amount of funding that they used to. I mean, HUD used to fund public housing at a much greater level, and Richmond has a housing authority, and the amount of cuts in the public housing budget was phenomenal, and people in public housing need to have the kind of life and the kind of housing, quality housing that allows their lives to thrive and prosper. But unfortunately, the cuts aren't there, and I don't think we can depend on higher government. I mean, we need to rally together as a community, and cities need to build that local political power, and then we can network together and put pressure on the state legislature and say, hey, we need more money for housing. We need to get some tax incentives for cities for truly affordable housing, and we need to tax at a higher rate luxury development. Cities oftentimes put in place luxury development because that's who the developers are coming into the city, and then they tell the residents, well, you got to wait, it's a trickle-down theory, but of course it never trickles down. So in Richmond, we really, really pushed for the truly affordable housing and worked with every method we could, including trying to work with Habitat for Humanity. We passed the first new rent control law in 30 years in California this past November. So, that slows down some of the gentrification we see happening all over, but we have to do more. So, as Lieutenant Governor, as a candidate, first of all, I'm encouraging cities and communities to really build alliances like the RPA and run local candidates without any corporate money so that, cities have more power. And then, as Lieutenant Governor, when I'm elected, because I'm also running to win as well as organize, I want to help network these organizations together so we can put pressure on the legislature. And of course, as Lieutenant Governor, I'll be sitting on different boards and commissions like the the State Lands Commission and the Coastal Commission, and I could advocate for our needed environmental issues. I'll also be on the UC Board of Regents and the the California State Board of Trustees. So I'll have an opportunity to bring students together and advocate for that free college that is needed in our state. And finally, another commission is the Economic Development Commission. And I could advocate for a public bank in our state. I've been putting that in my platform. And I know in Southern California, many people have, in LA in particular, have done great work in terms of pushing forward the idea of a public bank that can give really startup money for entrepreneurs and small businesses and help fund infrastructure in our state. So there's so much that we can do together. And as a candidate and later as Lieutenant Governor, I am just thrilled and excited and have that determination to be a part of it.
Well, you got some great plans, and you seem to be very comprehensive. I want you to be governor. This is the first step, though, to get you as lieutenant governor right now. So let's work on that first. This is remarkable. I mean, it seems like people just don't think clearly, or they're part of the media machine. We're doing primitive things. We're locking human beings up in cages and expecting them to come out as better individuals. Yes. And we're calling those correctional facilities. And then we're not giving them any way of making a living. We take away their ability to make a living. We take away their ability to go into public housing. Right. We take away their ability to vote.
Right.
So then you have this animals. Now we have these, I don't use the wrong word, but we have people doing terrible things.
People desperate, yeah.
Desperate people in our neighborhoods. And they're good people. They could be good people.
Yes.
But this is also causing something called implied memory to occur. Because it's damaging their families, it's damaging their kids. Yeah. And so the kids have these implied memories, and then they're growing up, they're following the same pattern, and we keep getting more and more crime because we're not dealing with it smartly. And it looks like this is what you're talking about. You're talking about being smarter.
That's right, absolutely, and I want to address that. I think you brought that up in your previous question that I didn't address. The issue of criminal justice reform is key. Right now, we have people in prison for all different levels of crime, nonviolent crime as well as violent crime. And what we want to do is prevent people from getting into crime. And if they are in the life of crime and they end up in prison, we want them to be rehabilitated. We want the programs to be there so they can turn their lives around. And when they get out of prison, we want them to have the reentry services and welcome them into our community after they've done their time, and give them that opportunity to be a part of the community and really showcase that they have that productivity and that they can be productive members of our community. As mayor, I used to visit San Quentin on a regular basis. And there was a project, and still is, in San Quentin called the Richmond Project. And it's a group of men who got together in San Quentin prison, and they helped get into self-help programs among their own groups. I mean, the prison helped, and they had some wonderful people kind of facilitating the groups, but they also facilitated their own groups. They formed their own structure, and I had an opportunity to see what they did and the kind of self-help they gave each other, and they would tell me, we're getting some help, and San Quentin has some good programs, not all prisons do, and San Quentin should probably improve further on their programs, but it's considered a prison that has some good programs. But the men I talked to said when they get out of prison, the programs aren't there for them. So they wanted me to make sure we had reentry services. And we got a wonderful program, a whole one-stop center set up in Richmond that's called the Reentry Solutions Center. And people, when they get out of prison, can go there, learn about housing opportunities, programs, and support groups so they can support each other and keep moving their lives in the right direction. And one of the things we see in California and all over our country is the privatization of prisons. And that is so obscene. I mean, the idea of having prisons for profit is ridiculous. When profit means that would mean that you would want to have more people in prison because then you would get more profit. When the idea is not to have more people in prison, is to prevent them from going in, and when they come in, to get them out and have them not go back in. So this privatization has to stop. There's something like 6 to 8 private prisons in California, and many in other states, and some Californians are imprisoned in other private prisons outside of the state, away from their families. And so all this has to change. We really, it's the injustice of our society, the social injustice, the racial injustice, the economic injustice that puts people in desperate straits, that is a precursor to the crime that we see. So it's time we really stop building prisons and start building opportunity for each and every resident. And it's just, to me, I've seen it up close in Richmond, how generations have, been lost in poverty and all the other problems that people in poverty have, whether it's health problems or just problems with access to education. And it results in oftentimes erupting on our streets in crime. Martin Luther King said it well, and I often quoted this to our community who knew it well as well, that it goes back to the Vietnam era, that the bombs that burst in Vietnam also burst on our city streets, because the money, as you said rightly, Walter, goes for war, and then there's not enough money for the needs of people in our cities, and so the desperation sets in, and then the violence and the crime sets in. So we've got to reverse that trend.
So we look at the cost in terms of lives alone. That's, you can't calculate that.
Right.
You look at the amount of money we're spending on police forces, and so justice depends upon how much justice you can buy.
Right.
So if poor people can't afford an attorney, they can't afford justice, so they're not getting justice. So we have this problem that's simply being exacerbated by repeat offenders that are not being helped. And so, for example, with this plea bargaining, I understand, is really unconstitutional, from what I've heard from scholars. And these individuals are taking plea bargains to not go to prison for longer terms, and yet, if they snitch, they get out of prison early, which saves the state $55,000 per person. Why can't they take that $55,000 and give it to the individual? They already had it slated to lock them up. Right. Give it to the people, so at least the first year they have an income and they don't have to turn to crime.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We should be, I believe we should be giving a basic income to every individual in our state. Other states, other countries have utilized this. A basic level of income, so that nobody goes without, so we don't have homelessness, so we don't have the crime. And we should give, along with this basic income, and just enough to get by and get people on their feet so they can go up and find a career and a vocation to bring in more money and lead a healthier and more sustainable life. But we also need to bring out the civil rights of every individual. And you mentioned the issue of voting. I believe that people in prison should have the right to vote as well. Every single, individual should be participating in our democracy and our electoral system. And people who have gotten into prison understand some of the bad laws that led them into the state of desperation. And they should have a right to vote on laws, changing the laws, coming up with new laws, so that our society is more equitable and just, so that the desperation that they felt isn't felt by others and isn't felt by them when they get out of prison. So a couple of states, like Maine and Vermont, already allow the incarcerated individuals in their prisons to vote on all levels of government, and I think that we should do that in California.
Well, it seems like we're land of the free. We have so many restrictions on taking away people's voting rights. What about automatic registration for voting, like when you get your driver's license? How do you feel about that?
I think that is a wonderful idea. I most definitely support that. it's a problem when people are, not registered and they may not go through the process. We of course keep trying to get more and more people registered, and the easiest way to do that is through the when they get their driver's license, automatically register them to vote. So I think it's a wonderful way of making sure we have more people involved in voting and in the democratic process. And we also many people have thought about giving our immigrant community, at least on lower, like on school board levels, giving them an opportunity to vote, because so many of their children go to schools. That to be able to vote for school board members seems like a reasonable thing, and we should be protecting our immigrant community. Richmond is a sanctuary city, and we continuously supported our immigration rights, and I would do the same and want to see the same happen in California on a statewide level, and really stand up against the way Trump is really just being so hostile to so many groups in the U.S. To the hatred and the extreme actions that he's put into place for minorities, for people of color in general, and just in general, his attitude of hate is something we all have to resist. The city of Richmond sued Trump for his policies against sanctuary cities.
Good for them.
So we've shown that we will stand up for all sectors of our community, and on a statewide level, California can do that too. And we could be that model state for other states in the country. And that's what excites me about this run for Lieutenant Governor, because I can really bring people to understand, just as Richmond became a model city for other cities, let's make California a model state. And I bet there would be a domino effect throughout the country. So we've got a really wonderful opportunity in front of us.
So I know a lot of people are not familiar with history. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at the immigrants issue, Mexico opened its northern frontier up to the Anglos or the people in North America to come in to fill their northern frontier, because they didn't have enough population, and they had two stipulations: that they become Catholic, that they don't bring slaves. But unfortunately, they brought slaves, so we had the Mexican-American War, and they painted Santa Anna as this terrible person, yet it was the United States that disavowed that treaty. And the very first combat action against the Mexican government occurred very close to here in Chino Hills. And so we had many battles in this area in Southern California, one in which Kit Carson was defeated in Escondido. And he was defeated by the brother of the governor of California at that time, Pio Pico. That's why all the streets in California, all the cities, have a Pico Boulevard. They're because of Pio Pico, the last Mexican governor of California, and he was of African descent.
Okay.
His brother defeated Kit Carson at Escondido, then he went forward and defeated the Mexican army in Los Angeles, and of course, these Mexican people that lived in California were called Californios.
Right.
And the Californios were guaranteed they were going to keep their properties. However, the government at that time wanted to tax them on those properties. They couldn't produce their deeds because most of them were illiterate, and their deeds were in Mexico City. So they confiscated their land, and they pushed the Californios and formed Tijuana. They kicked them off of their property. Now we have the temerity to have a U.S. government that says they want to kick immigrants out of the country. And so we've had this ebb and flow where people have been welcomed into the country, then they kick them out. Then they welcome them in, they kick them out. They come up with special laws for the Chinese to make sure that they criminalize opium so that Chinese people would be put into prison. So this thing about having drug laws to lock people up goes back a very long way. This thing about criminalizing people because they're immigrants, that wasn't done necessarily to the Italians, it wasn't really done to the British people. But when it comes to these people of color, the Chinese, it comes to black, the Haitians, take the Haitians back. You know, there's a very unfair thing. And I heard you talk about civil rights and protecting people's civil rights. And it seems like we have this long trend of just taking people's rights away and not guaranteeing legal rights, not guaranteeing rights to happiness. We don't hear discussion about happiness. Why don't we hear people talk about happiness?
I know.
Like, that doesn't even matter. Just, okay, well, I'm a politician and whatever. Let me in the office and I'm going to take care of everything. But there's no conversation about happiness. So what I'd like to see in your message is a phrase similar, whatever, loving actions. I'm looking for politicians that are going to take loving actions, and loving actions are ethical actions.
Absolutely.
So if I won't do it to your kid, you don't do it to my kid. I won't do it to your mother, you don't do it to mine. I don't do it to your husband, you don't do it to my wife, etc. So ethics. So how can I kick your father out of the country? Would I do that to mine? Why would I lock up your brother for having a plant for 35 years? Would I lock up my brother for 35 years for having a plant? This is ridiculous. So we need ethical policy, not moral. Moral is subjective. Ethics, though, are common. And I'm sorry for rambling on with it.
No, that's a good point.
I want to know how you feel about what I just said in that context.
Absolutely. First of all, let me say, when you talked about happiness, it just, reached me at my soul, because isn't that what our Constitution says, that everyone should have the right to the pursuit of happiness? Well, that isn't the way it is. We need those ethics you're talking about, and we need to say everyone has the right to be happy, and everyone has the right to have that pathway to happiness. And the way I believe to get there, in addition to getting people's needs met on every level, is to build that kindness with one another, that love of each other as sisters and brothers. I mean, that's true happiness, to have that solidarity as a human race with one another and not be fighting, with each other for limited resources or for whatever, hate is coming down from, in this case, in today's world, from our White House. Instead, we want to build those kinds of organizations that encourage us to relate to one another as brothers and sisters. So that is part of my message. It's like, let's be inclusive. Let's be kind to one another. We could disagree at times. Sometimes conflict, of ideas is a good thing. Sometimes you come up with new ideas. And I'm always open to hear other people's ideas and share mine, and, sometimes a whole new aspect of my platform can come about. I mean, I've already added things on based on so many conversations. So kindness is very key to the message that I am putting forward and that I'll continue to put forward. And it is, I know I'm so excited that your show is really a show that speaks to world issues, and because we are one world. I mean, we should be one world, and more now than ever, when our planet's sustainability is at risk here, we need to connect with people everywhere. I mean, as mayor, I took a few trips overseas. I went to Ecuador to see the damage to the rainforest that Chevron did and is responsible for cleaning up, and I met indigenous people there who have been harmed by the oil industry's contamination of the rainforest that was their home. I went to Mondragon, Spain, and learned about worker-owned cooperatives there, how there's workplace democracy when there's multiple owners of businesses, and they have the sixth wealthiest business in Spain is the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. And it's really a network of corporations, of cooperative corporations, worker-owned. And so I learned about that. And I also went to Cuba because Richmond has a sister city of Regla, Cuba. And Regla, Cuba is a largely Afro-Cuban city across the bay from Havana, just like Richmond has a large African-American community, and we're across the bay from San Francisco. So we have a lot in common, and so we became sister cities, and we went there and got to see a lot of the changes in Cuba and a lot of the solidarity of the Cuban Revolution and the positive changes that they have made. And so I was very pleased to take those international trips, because even when you work on a local level or a statewide level, I think we need to make those connections with the worldwide community, because we are a global family, and we have to really cultivate that further.
And we should be world citizens. We should have a perception of being world citizens.
Absolutely.
And so what amazes me, or what has amazed me recently, with all the catastrophic hurricanes that are striking, Texas and Florida, I watched these governors, these conservative governors in these southern states, believe science when they said the hurricane is going to turn. I mean, I was looking at the path of the hurricane. I'm thinking, well, how's this thing going to turn? It looks like it's going straight. What's going to make it turn all of a sudden? And the hurricane turned exactly the way they said and started heading to the north. They'll believe that. They began to evacuate their citizens. However, when that same group of scientists says global warming and fossil fuels, they discard that. Oh, that's a hoax.
Right. Yeah. We can't count on these climate deniers and the few scientists who they unite, or they claim stand for this approach that climate change isn't happening, when the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of scientists say clearly we're in the midst of climate change, and we have to move quickly, as swiftly as possible to reverse this, so that future generations don't have a massive extinction of the human race, to deal with. I mean, some people may say, and I think the 1%, the corporations, especially the oil companies, are thinking only of their own short-term profits, and they figure, oh, well, give me what my needs are, and the future, doesn't matter. They don't even think that far ahead. So it's up to us to really raise that consciousness. And when we see those hurricanes happening, including the situation in Puerto Rico right now, it's devastating. It should be, first of all, there should be aid given to the people of Puerto Rico as soon as possible, because I mean, it's just amazing when we all watch it on TV and see people, holding up signs, we need water and food, and our federal government isn't providing the needed resources. They should be sending the military in to Puerto Rico to help them out, rather than into wars and spending money on weaponry. But it also should be a reminder to us that climate change is happening, and it's stirring up these hurricanes, it's stirring up the tsunamis, and just causing a real urgent situation. So it's a shame that some people have their eyes closed to this.
So with you in government, you are going to be an advocate for smarter spending of our resources and our treasure. In other words, we were talking earlier about how Los Angeles has now allocated $2 billion to build a new prison to house 3,000 inmates, whereas my calculations reveal that for every $1 billion, that is 18,500 jobs at $54,000 a year. So
yeah.
Right. Something that would benefit 18,000, in this case, 37,000 people could be employed with that money.
That's right. They
would rather use it to house and warehouse human beings, 3,000 of them.
Yes.
And so there's a misallocation on a state level. We're misallocating funds into the police department. I'm not saying we don't need police, but we have people that need to be put in check.
Yeah.
However, better management of our law enforcement, better management of our legal system, as you mentioned earlier, better allocation of our resources is integral to us having a better California, whereas we can have more jobs, We can have a better education system. We can have a better educated populace. We can have a happier populace. And with happier people with their basic needs being met, that means less crime.
That's right. That's right. We most definitely should not be putting these resources into building more and more prisons. You know, there's various groups, at least in the Bay Area, and I'm sure all over California, bring about slogans like books, you know, not prisons, well, books, not bombs as well, but, you know, we need people over profits instead of imprisoning people. We need to and putting the money into these private prisons or putting the money into building new prisons. We need to provide for the people now, and that part of the way we do that is by providing those jobs that you're talking about. 35,000 jobs is an amazing number, and it will give people that opportunity to sustain their lives and start to move into a, you know, the kind of lifestyle from youngster onward that brings about the kind of happiness that we need. In Richmond, we have opposed many local jails. We successfully did so. I think there were 3 different times that we mobilized the community, and that's how we work in Richmond. We mobilize the community, and we have good elected officials who are not corporate affiliated sitting at the dais, and together we make the points that need to be made. And one of them has been to stop prison expansion. And so we stopped 2 jails. One we were not able to stop. It comes from the county. The county is in charge of building these local jails and expanded prisons. And one of them, we still are trying to prevent it, but the county board of supervisors passed the money, I mean, for this additional expansion of a jail. And it's outrageous when that money could have been used for really good things that help the community. So that smart way of operating is absolutely essential. And I think it needs to come from all of us, and it needs to come from people understanding that if you sit on the sidelines, things aren't going to happen. And if you think that there are some people in charge going to make things happen for you, it's just not going to happen. Right now, California is dominated by corporations. If you go to Sacramento and you go into our state buildings, there's corporate lobbyists throughout all the halls of our state government. And they are lobbying our state legislators. And then when bills come up, whether it's bills for expanded prisons or bills like single-payer health care, as an example, we had Speaker Rendon shelve SB 562, which is California's single-payer bill. He didn't even let it stay on the floor for discussion. So it was shelved, and he gets lots of money from the insurance companies. And that's, you know, these are corporations that have funded his campaign and that influence him when he gets bills before his committee. So what we need to do is get those corporations out of government on all levels and get those corporate-funded elected officials on all levels of government replaced by, you know, corporate-free candidates, office holders. And we can do that. We can do that because it's people power that's really more important than money power. We proved it in Richmond when, you know, we overcame $3.5 million of Chevron money in the 2014 election. And I believe we can do it with the level of great activists we have in our state and great progressive organizations. We could say, as it's happening up and down the state, because I'm traveling up and down, and I see people saying, I'm going to run for city council without any corporate money. I'm running for school board without any corporate money. I'm moving this movement forward, and I want to play a role as an elected official. And I hear the community leaders saying, I'm there, you know, building around the issues of single payer. I'm mobilizing members of my neighborhood and my city and my community around the issues of stopping prison expansion. So there's so many great groups. We need to come together and show that we have the power, and we can make it happen. You know, it's people first. That's the slogan of my campaign. That's the slogan, I think, that every really clear-thinking, progressive person who understands the problems with our democracy, understands corporate interference in our democracy, that's a common knowledge, I think, for progressives. And we need to voice it over and over again.
So I call that the corporatocracy. And so, in light of what you said, one of the techniques I recommend people look at is to go to opensecrets.org. There you can tell what company and how much money they gave to political campaigns. Then we can target these corporations with boycotts.
Right.
And do organized boycotts. If you continue to fund this thing, whatever it is, against the wishes of our community, we're going to boycott you. And when that's done effectively, even the threat of a boycott will make them just back down, because the damage from boycotts can last for years.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one thing corporations understand, and that's money, and selling their products is how they get their money. So boycotts can, be very effective, especially if we can really get them to take off and have many people join in them. So I agree with you 100%. There's so many types of action that is needed, and history has shown. You talked a little bit about history. I just want to touch on how important history is, because there's this attempt to, put forward a revisionist history, and not to tell the truth. And most of us were educated with a lot of this revisionist history. We haven't gotten all the truth. And so we need to fill in those gaps, and we need to change the educational system so the truth is told and omissions aren't left out. And it's, the history of boycotts is one example of how effective they have been. So, and if we don't learn from the past, learn from the good things that have happened in the past and learn from the mistakes of the past, we're not going to be able to, build on the good things and avoid the bad things. So I just would love to see the young people, and I know young people are getting more and more activated. Bernie Sanders had a lot of young people supporting his campaign because he talked the truth about the inequality of wealth and Wall Street and big banks and all that. And people understand that. The Occupy movement understood that before Bernie Sanders. And I think we need young people to understand, even going back further, the union movement, when unions got started, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the startup of the environmental movement. There were great activists in all these movements. And of course, the history of the Civil War and every aspect of people who fought for justice, and all the African slaves that were involved with fighting for their freedom. I mean, all of that is left out in the history books.
And there were Africans that fought on the side of the Confederacy as well.
Yeah, right. So the truth has to be told in general.
And there were Mexicans.
And there were
Asian Confederates, and those stories never get told.
Yes, we need to tell the truth so people can look at the past with wide open eyes and, move forward in the best possible way based on an understanding of that history.
So we have far exceeded your time. I really enjoyed this interview with you. I've got more time, but I know that you have to go somewhere. Yeah. And it's right now we're looking at 11:48, so we're well into your time.
Yeah.
But I want to really thank you for being so gracious to talk about this. And so based upon this conversation, I'm assuming that you are supportive of a more inclusive education system. Right now we have a Eurocentric education system that says Christopher Columbus discovered America.
Right. Yeah.
And LaSalle discovers Mississippi River with Indian guides. So right. We have this fantasy world. We're about to celebrate Christopher Columbus Day again. Right, Christopher Columbus murdered all these people.
That's right.
So I would like to have history told, or education told, by the people that were involved. So if Latinos were involved, what's the Latino perspective? What's the Black? What's the Native American perspective? What's the Seminole perspective? What is the Blackfeet? What is the Choctaw? What is the Dakota? aspect of the story. That is an education. But what we're getting is an indoctrination.
That's right. Walter, you say it so well. I know how important history is to you and how much history knowledge you have. It really needs to get out there. We really need to hear history from the perspective of those who have, often been omitted from the history books or misrepresented in the history books. So what you're saying is absolutely true, and I thank you for all your wonderful work.
So to wrap this up, I want to make sure you present, the most important things, and that you didn't leave anything out that you wanted to make sure the public was aware of. So please do that.
Okay. So I guess just in summary, I would say, I'm running this campaign for Lieutenant Governor of California for 3 reasons. One, to encourage organizing on all levels of government, especially on the local level, to build that local political power, running candidates without corporate money. I'm also running this campaign to raise the statewide issues of single-payer, Medicare for all, free college, banning fracking, taxing the highest incomes, the millionaires and the corporations in our state, and by putting out the message that we want our education system to be the best possible and not have it privatized. Education should be a public system for every child, all the way up through college. And lastly, and there's many other issues of statewide significance, including a public bank, that people can find on my website, which is www.gayle, Gayle, California.org, GayleForCalifornia.org. So they could see the statewide issues. And the final point is that we need to get those corporations and that corporate interference out of our state government and out of every level of government. So that's my message.
This is Walter Davis with Progress in the World, coming to you from lovely Canyon Lake, California. And today we've had the great pleasure to have Gayle McLaughlin on, who's running for Lieutenant Governor. Learn more about her. Go to the websites that are embedded within the description of this broadcast and get involved and give her your support. She's a good person. I haven't heard any other person running for office ever speak on the topics that she just talked about, so she's got my support 100%. So with that, this is Walter Davis. Please share this on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, whatever you have. Please put it out there and get the word out again. And I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you very much.